Understanding petition with Chinese characteristics. When you hear the word petition, what comes to mind? A democratic tool, a call for change, a voice of the people? In China, the word Xìnfǎng, commonly translated as petition, tells a very different story. One that blends complaint, control, and the illusion of redress in a system unlike anything in the West. Welcome to Petition with Chinese characteristics. What Xìnfǎng means in the Chinese context. Xìnfǎng, literally meaning letters and visits, refers to a formalized state-run system where citizens submit grievances or requests to government offices, either by letter or in person. It functions outside the legal system, and unlike legal appeals, it operates entirely within the discretion of the administrative bureaucracy. But Xìnfǎng is not just a complaints mechanism, it is a political pressure valve. Its deeper purpose is to maintain social stability, allowing the regime to monitor public dissatisfaction and address or suppress problems before they boil over into protest or resistance. For citizens, however, it's often a humiliating and grueling process, one marked by endless bureaucracy, lack of transparency, and often no meaningful resolution. Why petition is a misleading translation. Translating Xìnfǎng as simply petition is misleading. In English, a petition implies a democratic appeal, an empowered action that might lead to legal or political change. Xìnfǎng is neither democratic nor legally binding. A more accurate translation might be letters and visits system or citizen grievance and complaint mechanism, but perhaps most precisely administrative grievance monitoring and exhaustion system, which better captures its true function, to contain, control, and wear down discontent rather than resolve it. These alternatives better reflect its role as a state-controlled apparatus for managing dissent rather than resolving injustice. Petition in the West versus petition in China. In Western democracies, a petition is typically a transparent collective action aimed at changing laws or influencing public policy. It is supported by freedom of expression, public debate, media coverage, and often judicial recourse. In China, by contrast, petitioning is a solitary act, disconnected from public mobilization. There are no independent courts to turn to, no free media to amplify the grievance, and no political opposition to lobby for change. Instead, petitioning becomes a last resort, and often a dead end. In short, petitioning in the West is a democratic tool for change that is transparent, open, and often collective. It can influence laws or policies and is supported by the media and civil society. China's petition system is a tool of bureaucratic control. Each petition is isolated, opaque, and personal, rarely leads to meaningful solutions, and is often suppressed or ignored by the authorities. Why is Xìnfǎng still translated as petition? A strategic simplification. This isn't a linguistic accident. The Chinese state deliberately translates Xìnfǎng as petition to create a harmless and familiar impression to outside observers. It implies that China, like other nations, allows its citizens to complain and seek redress, projecting an image of responsiveness and order. But behind that sanitized word is a deeply hierarchical and repressive structure, meant not to empower but to exhaust. It's a system where many spend years or decades chasing justice, only to end up being detained, silenced, or further victimized. By keeping the term petition, the regime avoids international scrutiny, masks the totalitarian logic behind the practice, and pretends that something resembling rule of law exists. Xìnfǎng, a system rooted in history. On May 8, 2025, a piercing cry echoed through the heart of Beijing. Outside the imposing facade of the Supreme People's Court, a group of petitioners gathered, their voices heavy with frustration and despair. "There are still many innocent people imprisoned," they shouted. "The law has become a tool for crime." In China, Xìnfǎng, or going up to complainer, has deep historical roots. For centuries, commoners sought redress by appealing directly to higher authorities. Bypassing corrupt or abusive local officials, these journeys were often desperate acts of last resort in a system stacked against them. The official English translation for this ancient practice? Unsurprisingly, petition. But while the word may sound familiar to Western ears, as we've explained, its meaning in the Chinese context carries a very different weight, one shaped not by civic empowerment but by imperial hierarchy and control. Did Xìnfǎng work historically? For the most part, no. While imperial edicts encouraged commoners to report abuses by local officials, in practice, very few petitions led to real justice. The system was designed more to project an image of imperial benevolence than to deliver it. Petitioners were often ignored or punished. Only a handful of exceptional cases, like the famed Yang Naiwu and Xiao Baisai case, which we'll return to later, were resolved in the people's favor. The fame of that one case underscores just how rare such outcomes were. Is it working today? Still not. And just like in imperial times, today's petitioners often face harassment, surveillance, and even detention. Local authorities routinely intercept them before they can reach higher offices, fearing punishment for unstable elements. Even when petitioners manage to navigate the maze and make it to Beijing, their cases are typically ignored or buried in bureaucracy. The system, both then and now, offers the illusion of redress, but rarely the reality. So why keep it? Why not abolish it altogether and build a real, functioning legal system like other countries have? The short answer: because it's meant to fail. In this video, we take a deep dive into how China's petition system doesn't serve those seeking justice, but the regime that designed it to drain them. It's not about resolution. It's about exhaustion, surveillance, and control. That's why, after 1949, the Chinese Communist Party resurrected this imperial relic, one the KMT had already discarded, not to empower the people, but to keep them on their knees. The petition system's appeal is not practical, it's psychological, even cultural. It's a carefully constructed trap disguised as a tradition of justice. Its emotional pull comes from a centuries-old belief rooted in imperial China. The emperor is benevolent. The problem lies with corrupt local officials. That belief didn't die when the system was abolished by the KMT. It survived. And under the CCP, it was not only revived but strengthened. Today, many still cling to the hope that if only they could get their grievances heard by those at the very top, justice would prevail. But that hope is an illusion, and a dangerous one. Because while people chase justice, the system quietly redirects their anger away from itself and toward individual bad apples. The regime fosters this belief because it protects the image of a wise and moral center, while allowing structural injustice to go unchallenged. When was the petition system abolished, and why didn't it last? The petition system was formally abolished in the early decades of the Republic of China, following the 1911 Xinhai Revolution. Seen as an outdated relic of imperial rule, it was rejected as incompatible with modern legal and constitutional principles. Leaders of the time sought to build a new system based on law, not on appeals to imperial benevolence. This rejection of Xìnfǎng spanned the 37 years after the revolution, across two overlapping eras. During this time, formal legal channels were prioritized over traditional appeals. Petitioning, Xìnfǎng, was seen as a symbol of backwardness, not justice, a practice best left behind with the imperial past. The Kuomintang regime under Chiang Kai-shek made considerable efforts in the 1930s to modernize China's legal system. They established formal courts, codified laws based on the civil law traditions of Germany and Japan, and created institutions like the Ministry of Justice, the Bar Examination Department, and the Office of the State Prosecutor. Most importantly, they explicitly rejected the old Confucian model of paternalistic rule. Instead of relying on virtuous leaders to dispense justice through petitions, the KMT pushed for a system where citizens would seek justice through law, not through personal appeals to morality. But despite these intentions, the reforms were limited, unevenly implemented, and ultimately undermined by persistent corruption, political instability, and the devastating impact of the Japanese invasion. Resurrection of an outdated system. As we've discussed, the petition system never truly existed to serve justice. It was a pressure valve, designed more to preserve imperial authority than to protect the rights of commoners. So, when the system was revived after 1949, it wasn't some accidental return to tradition, nor a reluctant step backward. It was a calculated decision, personally championed by Mao Zedong. Mao understood its potential. For him, the petition system wasn't a baggage from the imperial past. It was a tool, a way to mobilize the masses, stage a moral high ground, and centralize control. Far from contradicting the CCP's claim to be more advanced or just than the Kuomintang, the petition system became one of its most powerful instruments of psychological and political governance. Mao Zedong understood something fundamental about the Chinese psyche, something many reformers missed. As a peasant steeped in rural traditions, Mao intuitively grasped a deep-rooted belief that had shaped generations of Chinese thinking. Local officials might be corrupt, but the emperor, the supreme ruler, was just. If only the top knew, he would set things right. This belief, rooted in China's Confucian legalist heritage, was more than cultural inertia. It was a political opportunity, and while Republican reformers tried to replace it with modern legal institutions, they underestimated how deeply ingrained this vertical appeal to power remained in the minds of millions. Mao saw immense potential in resurrecting this system, and he was quick to act. After 1949, he personally encouraged the masses to write to the party and the state. To Mao, these letters weren't just complaints, they were tools, instruments of mass supervision, mechanisms for rooting out corruption, and, most importantly, a way to reinforce the sacred bond between the people and the supreme leader. Just as emperors were once seen as the ultimate source of justice, Mao positioned himself and the party center as the new righteous authority above all. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, Mao repeatedly emphasized listening to the people. He read letters, issued directives, and ordered party cadres to take the voice of the masses seriously. But in practice, the petition system often served more cynical purposes: to intimidate local officials, launch political campaigns, and absorb grievances without resolving them. By institutionalizing petition offices, the Xìnfǎng ban, and allowing people to bypass courts and appeal to the center, Mao recreated the imperial order under a red flag. He sidelined the formal legal system, which he saw as bureaucratic and elitist, and promoted a system where politics, not law, would be the ultimate judge. In short, the petition system made a comeback because Mao wanted it back. He saw in it a powerful method to cultivate the party's image as morally superior to both local officials and the Kuomintang, while maintaining direct ideological control over the people. It allowed popular anger to be redirected toward bad cadres rather than the system itself, and it offered a way to replace modern institutional justice with a more controllable, personalized form of redress. This return to imperial-style justice, cloaked in revolutionary language, remains one of the greatest ironies of the People's Republic, a state that claimed to destroy despotism yet chose to revive one of its most psychologically potent instruments. How the petition system evolved after 1949. Like everything else, the petition system has undergone various changes, big and small, over the years since it was reintroduced during the Mao era, 1950s to 1960s, rebuilding and weaponizing red justice. In the early PRC, petitioning was actively encouraged, as long as it didn't challenge party authority. Letters and visits, Xìnfǎng, were seen as a way to connect with the masses and expose corrupt or counter-revolutionary elements. But the legal system was weak, and many grievances were filtered through danwei, work units, and mass campaigns. Mao's mass line theory promoted a moral rather than legal form of accountability. Yet during political purges, for example, anti-rightist campaign, cultural revolution, petitioning could turn deadly, used to denounce others or bring cases directly to the party, bypassing courts altogether. Result, petitioning was politicized. You could be heard or purged, depending on the tides of ideology. A 1970s to 1980s, post-Mao reforms and legal reconstruction. After Mao's death, Deng Xiaoping pushed for rule by law, not rule of law, to rebuild post-Cultural Revolution society. Courts were slowly rebuilt, and the State Bureau for Letters and Calls was formalized. Petitioning regained momentum as a form of low-cost redress for victims of earlier political movements, for example, wrongfully labeled rightists. Many were told to write to the center, creating an illusion of access and correction, but local governments remained defensive and opaque. Most petitions were quietly buried or referred back to the very authorities people were complaining about. The disconnect between the central government and local authorities widened. Petitioners often became repeat petitioners, known in Chinese as Xìnfǎng, a term with negative connotations implying they are troublesome or overly persistent. Many found themselves trapped in an endless cycle of appeals, surveillance and dismissal. 1990s to 2000s. Legalization on paper, suppression in practice. The Xìnfǎng system expanded in scale and bureaucracy. By the early 2000s, tens of millions of petitions were filed annually, but only a tiny fraction were resolved favorably. 2005 petition regulation tried to streamline the process but emphasized stability over justice. Interceptors, Xìnfǎng, began appearing en masse. Agents sent by local governments to Beijing to kidnap, threaten or drag petitioners home before they could reach state offices. Black jails, psychiatric detention and surveillance were widely used. It became clear petitioning was tolerated only as long as it stayed invisible and ineffective. The system was a trap. You could scream into it, but not challenge its foundations. 2010 to present, surveillance state meets petition theatre. The petition system, Xìnfǎng, has been absorbed into the broader framework of stability maintenance, Weiwen, a vast apparatus designed to neutralize dissent before it becomes unrest. Chronic petitioners are now classified as sensitive persons, tracked through AI and big data systems that monitor their movements, communications, and associations in real time. What was once portrayed as a legitimate avenue for citizens to express grievances is increasingly depicted by the regime as anti-social behavior or even a threat to public order. In recent years, the state introduced online petition platforms under the banner of modernization and accessibility. In practice, however, these digital channels have functioned more as surveillance tools and blacklists than as vehicles for resolution. Today's reality, a system that consumes its own citizens. The petition system still functions, but only for the benefit of the state. It absorbs public anger before it erupts into protest. It redirects blame from central authorities to local scapegoats. It transforms desperation into ritualized theater, where the powerless are put on display, not heard, and by now it doesn't even bother to pretend otherwise. The State Bureau for Letters and Calls, once framed as a channel for justice, has become little more than a gatekeeper. Xi Jinping's slogan of comprehensively rule the country by law, Quanmianyi Fa Ji Guo, rings hollow in the face of what petitioners actually endure: surveillance, blacklisting, harassment, detention, and even forced psychiatric confinement. The system leaves no doubt. The path to justice is kept open just long enough to swallow those who dare walk it. The irony: a symbol of justice becomes a tool of injustice. The Xìnfǎng system was once designed to project an image that the party listens. Today, it reveals the opposite. You are allowed to speak, but never to be heard. You may appeal to power, but only if you remain powerless. And perhaps nothing captures a Chinese characteristic more clearly than this: an institution that performs justice as theatre without ever delivering it. When surveillance state meets petition theatre. The CCP has long viewed public displays of discontent as a threat to its grip on power. Petitioning, especially when it spills onto the streets of Beijing, disrupts the carefully crafted image of stability and harmony that the party seeks to project. This is particularly true during major political events such as party congresses or international summits, when the authorities go to extraordinary lengths to silence dissent and maintain a facade of order. The party's obsession with stability maintenance has led to the creation of a vast security apparatus dedicated to monitoring and controlling potential sources of unrest. Most ordinary Chinese citizens, while fully aware that they live under surveillance, have probably never directly experienced the petition system. Many people think they never will, but this may not always be the case. Sometimes all it takes is being in the wrong chat group at the wrong time. Sometimes what local authorities believe you might do is enough to place you under suspicion. This happened to a friend of mine in September 2019, before the 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic. Tensions were high, surveillance was tightening, and police across the country were under pressure to maintain stability at all costs. He wasn't a petitioner. He hadn't broken any laws, but that didn't stop the police from showing up in his life, uninvited, unclear, and unrelenting. Here is the story of how he became a target by mistake, and how he narrowly dodged a mysterious bullet. A friend's close encounter with the petitioning system, but not quite, in Shanghai. In 2019, a friend of mine, an IT engineer living in Shanghai, had an experience that left a lasting impression on him. It was a normal weekday evening when he received an unexpected call from the local police station just after work. The officer on the line told him to come in for questioning. Confused, he asked what the issue was, only to be met with irritation. "You know it yourself," the officer snapped. He didn't. Frustrated by the vagueness and the tone, my friend declined, saying he had prior plans that evening. The police insisted. He finally compromised, saying he'd be available after 9 p.m. after the event in Pudong, and they settled on 9:30. But the story didn't end there. As soon as he entered the subway station to cross the river to Pudong, another call came, this time from someone claiming to be from the Pudong police station, asking where he was headed. Surprised, he explained that he was attending a private art exhibit as part of a volunteer commitment. To his surprise, the Pudong officer asked whether they could meet at the exhibition site, which was a venue of a private business. My friend, although annoyed, agreed. And when the police asked for the address, he told them not to waste his time and to look it up online. While still in transit, a third call came in. The same officer now said, "Since it's late and it's Friday night, if you trust me, how about we just talk on the phone?" The real reason for this unexpected police interest became clear. The authorities judged based on discussions in a WeChat group that he might be planning to go to Beijing to petition for LGBTQ rights on Sunday. My friend was stunned. He knew nothing of such a plan. In fact, he was flying to Hainan the next day, Saturday, for a week-long vacation scheduled just before the National Day holiday, because the tourist island would become too crowded by then. When he questioned how they got his number, the officer responded smugly, "We're the police. Of course we know your phone number and your address." The initial call had come from a police station just blocks from his home. Surveillance was clearly local, organized, and efficient. He explained his travel plans and provided his flight info, half sarcastic, half resigned. "You think I can be in 2 places at once, since you could theoretically see my ticket purchase history?" Now the officer sounded relieved, even friendly. "I see, good, it's all clear. I'm glad there's no such plan," he said. "Just don't get involved with those petitioners." When my friend asked how such a mistake could happen, the officer replied without hesitation, "I don't know, the intelligence came from our superiors. We're just following orders." It wasn't an apology. It was a matter-of-fact admission that even frontline enforcers aren't in control. They operate in a hierarchy, where tasks are handed down and executed, not questioned. As the conversation drew to a close, the officer asked one last question, unexpected but still relevant. What's your attitude toward LGBTQ people? Sympathy, disgust, or something else? Although my friend was caught off guard, he responded wittily, I don't know enough. If necessary, I can find out first and then answer. No need, the officer replied casually, just asking. It was only later that my friend realized the timing. The incident had happened in the second half of September 2019, a time when the nation was supposed to be celebrating, but instead the system was bracing for fear, not joy. The calls, the vague suspicions, the surveillance, they all made sense in hindsight, not because he had done anything wrong, but because, in moments of high ceremony, the state fears its own people most. Shouldn't we, and especially them, be preparing to celebrate, he told me later, but they were so terrified that raised questions in my mind. This incident reflects more than just an awkward brush with local law enforcement. This shows us the depth of real-time digital surveillance, which strictly controls petitioning behavior. The police know your every move, sometimes even before you do. At least that was the case with my friend. When they are unsure, they will still question or detain you, just in case. Your rights won't be the first thing they think of, or even at all. At the same time, it also reveals the phenomenon of presumption of guilt based on presumption of association in China's judicial practice. In fact, the reality is even worse. The phenomenon of an entire family being punished because of one person's violation is still very common in China today, especially for dissidents. And the bureaucracy of suspicion, where officers themselves don't know why someone is flagged, only that they've been told to check it out. And perhaps most disturbingly, how state paranoia trickles into everyday life through the surveillance system, warping the meaning of normal civic activities. LGBTQ rights, conversation in a chat group, even your opinions, into potential threat vectors. But for all the control, the theatre, the data-driven containment of dissent, one question remains: does it ever work? Can anyone actually win against a system built to absorb and deflect rather than resolve? The answer lies not in official statistics, but in the stories of those who dared to persist. Some became symbols, others disappeared. In this chapter, we look at the journeys of famous petitioners and what they reveal about a system that both promises justice and punishes the pursuit of it. Chen Guangcheng, blind legal activist from Shandong who exposed forced abortions under China's one-child policy, helped villagers file lawsuits and petitions, quickly became a target. Detained, beaten, placed under brutal house arrest. Escaped in 2012 and fled to the US Embassy. Now lives in exile. Family members who helped him were punished. The law was on our side, but the law didn't matter. Ni Yulan, former lawyer who petitioned over her home being forcibly demolished in Beijing, repeatedly detained, tortured in custody, ended up disabled, continues to live in near-homeless conditions, targeted in China's 2008 Olympic pre-cleanup and beyond. Tang Hui, mother seeking justice for her raped daughter. Background: her 11-year-old daughter was kidnapped and forced into prostitution. Tang petitioned relentlessly for harsher sentences on officials who failed her case. Outcome: sent to labor camp for disturbing public order, released after public pressure. Aftermath: Tang later sued the local government and won symbolic damages, 1 RMB. Significance: shows the system punishes persistent petitioners even when their cause is just. Does it ever work? The Xìnfǎng case, a death that exposed a system. In 2003, Xìnfǎng, a 27-year-old college graduate working in Guangzhou, was detained for not carrying his temporary residence permit. 3 days later, he was beaten to death in a detention center under China's custody and repatriation system, a Mao-era policy targeting migrants. His death sparked national outrage after investigative journalists exposed the case, prompting rare public debate. Sons, grieving parents, petitioned relentlessly for justice. Their effort, alongside the media pressure, forced the authorities to prosecute several officials and, in an unprecedented move, led to the abolition of the custody and repatriation system, a rare moment when truth, law, and public opinion briefly aligned in China. What made it different? Why did petition work this time? Timing. It was 2003. China's internet was still young, censorship not yet airtight, and legal scholars, journalists, even editors still had a bit of breathing room. The regime had just joined the WTO and was eager to present itself as rule of law oriented, at least to the outside world. It was a brief window when speaking out didn't yet feel suicidal. Victim profile. Sun Zhigang was not a rural migrant or political activist. He was a university graduate, clean record, urban background, the kind of person the rising middle class could see as one of their own. That made him harder to demonize and harder to ignore. Some media, courageous outlets like Southern Metropolis Daily, broke the story wide open. Sun Zhigang had been beaten to death in police custody under the custody and repatriation system. The reporting touched a nerve. Legal scholars submitted an open petition to the National People's Congress, arguing the system was unconstitutional. Public outrage surged, and for once the state relented, abolishing the policy in a rare concession. But the blowback came fast. Just a year later, Southern Metropolis Daily editor Cheng Yizhong was detained on trumped-up corruption charges, widely seen as punishment for his role in the reporting. The message was clear: we made an exception, don't mistake it for a precedent. The takeaway: the petition system is not designed to deliver justice. It is instead a trap that identifies and isolates the most desperate, a data collection tool for the party, a means of blacklisting dissent without making martyrs. And under Xi Jinping, it has been fused with AI surveillance, social credit and preemptive policing to ensure that loyalty outweighs legality. It is literally a prolonged suppression, a suffering made durable. But why so many people still think they can get justice from petitioning? Do people know what the petition system really is? Many do, especially long-time petitioners, but the reasons people still use it are complex and often painful. If they do, then why the system endures? First, there's no alternative. In China's totalitarian legal architecture, you cannot sue powerful officials independently, protest legally, or appeal internationally. Media is censored, NGOs are neutered, lawyers are targeted. Petitioning is the only legal outlet, even if it's symbolic and dangerous. It's like shouting into a void, but at least I shouted. Secondly, the myth still has power. The system plays on deep cultural and emotional conditioning. The belief that higher authorities will correct lower-level injustice, rooted in Confucian ideals. The emperor is benevolent, the local official is the bad one. The CCP actively maintains this myth, blames bad apples or corrupt local cadres, lets central propaganda pose as morally pure. One such practice is televised confessions by corrupt officials, an invention of the Xi Jinping era. Its purpose is to portray the central government and its leaders as powerful and morally clean, while bad things are done by bad officials. And more importantly, they will eventually be punished under the wise leadership of the top leader. There is also a more subtle form of propaganda manipulation disguised as entertainment. A famous example is the TV series Yang Naiwu and Xiao Baicai, which tells the story of two people who were used as scapegoats for a murderer in the Qing dynasty. After their families' unremitting petitions, which cost a fortune and took years, they were cleared of the charges, and many corrupt officials were punished or removed from their posts. Since 1949, Young Naiwu's story has been adapted into more than a dozen movies and TV series and is almost a household name. In a country where popular culture is strictly censored, this is no accident. Thirdly, occasional successes by design. The system occasionally resolves a few high-profile petitions to show the system works, soothe mass frustration, encourage faith in the top, not rebellion from below, although his victories are rare, often scripted, and used to diffuse broader demands for reform. They are deliberately exaggerated by the state propaganda machine. Frequent mention of the Sun Zhigang case and the story of Young Naiwu and Xiao Baitai, which is well known because of the TV dramas, give people the illusion that they may also be lucky. Last but not least, collective trauma. People are desperate. Many petitioners are not dissidents. They are ordinary people who lost everything. Homes bulldozed, family wrongly imprisoned, life savings stolen by corrupt officials. You can't join forces legally. You're told you have a problem, not that the system is broken. That fragmentation prevents collective resistance. The act of petitioning becomes a spiritual or emotional compulsion, a last stand for dignity. I don't expect them to listen, but if I stop, they win completely. Despite knowing it rarely brings resolution, countless Chinese citizens still turn to the petition system as their last resort. Not because they believe in it, but because they have no alternative. When the legal system fails and all institutional avenues close, petitioning becomes the only remaining door, even if it's a door that never opens. And here's the tragic truth. The people know it doesn't work. The regime knows the people know it doesn't work. Yet both sides continue the charade. The petition system is not about justice. It never was. It has mutated into something far more sinister and cynical, a mechanism of delay, a theatre of hope, a tool to absorb public rage before it erupts. To borrow a devastatingly accurate phrase, petitioning in China is a suffering made durable. It doesn't aim to resolve grievances. It exists to exhaust the aggrieved, isolate them, shuffle them between agencies, and make their pain manageable for the regime. It is a system that gives the appearance of responsiveness while ensuring no structural challenge to power ever takes root. It is slow, it is humiliating, it is performative, and it is by design. This is not a bug in the system. This is the system. The double hypocrisy of petitioning in China. First, hypocrisy, the myth of rule of law. The Chinese Communist Party insists that China is governed according to law, not personal whim. Yet the very existence and state endorsement of a parallel petition system proves otherwise. In a true rule of law society, disputes and injustices are handled by independent courts, not by appealing to political favor or higher-level pity. Petitioning, in essence, is a confession that the legal system doesn't work. It places faith not in legal procedures, but in the whims of a higher authority, recreating the old dynamic of pleading before the imperial throne. This reveals that the so-called rule of law is merely rule by law, a system where laws are selectively applied, politically controlled, and ultimately subordinate to party power. Second hypocrisy, the petition system itself. Petitioning is held up by the regime as a symbol of its care for the people, a channel through which the wronged can find justice. But in reality, it is a performance and a trap. Petitioners are often ignored, surveilled, detained, or punished. Some are locked in black jails, others are forcibly returned home. Local governments treat petitioners as threats to stability, not as citizens seeking redress. And very rarely, only when public outrage becomes too dangerous, does the party step in to resolve the case, claiming credit while punishing no one at the top. The hypocrisy here is brutal. The system pretends to care, but is actually designed to exhaust, silence, and discredit the very people it claims to serve. The voices of defiance and seeds of hope. In the shadow of control, civil society awakens. Despite the twisted architecture of repression, petition systems that exhaust rather than resolve, courts that serve power instead of justice, and media that echo only what is sanctioned, something resilient endures: the instinct to organize, to care, to resist. Civil society in China has never been allowed to grow freely. It has been choked at the roots, monitored, infiltrated, co-opted. NGOs must register under government sponsors, independent unions are illegal, churches are demolished or assimilated, and yet people still come together. After natural disasters like the 2008 Sichuan earthquake, volunteers flooded into ruined towns faster than officials, offering aid, burial, and solidarity. During COVID lockdowns, mutual aid groups spontaneously formed in countless cities, delivering food and medicine when state mechanisms failed. The regime's response is predictable: smash one, silence 10. But civil society is not a single organization. It's a spirit, and spirits don't die easily. Each petition, each blog post, each quiet act of defiance is a seed. Some are crushed, some are burned, but some take root deep beneath the surveillance and fear waiting. The CCP may control the institutions, but it has never fully captured the human will to connect, to grieve together, to help one another, and to demand dignity. And so, even in a land where truth is policed, a society slowly wakes, not always in protest, but often in compassion, which is even more subversive in a world built on cruelty. Resilience, awareness, and the power of truth. In a regime built on lies, truth is power. The Chinese petition system is not a relic of benevolence, it is a carefully preserved illusion. A tool of statecraft that turns the pain of individuals into a bureaucratic treadmill. It masquerades as a channel for justice while functioning as a mechanism of exhaustion, surveillance, and control. It allows the regime to say, "We heard you," while ensuring that nothing changes. But within this cynical design lies its own contradiction. The mere existence of petitioners, tens of thousands every year, many risking everything, is a living testament that the system is not trusted, that injustice persists, and that the people have not given up. They are not deluded, they know the odds, but they also know what silence means. Petitioners, whether aging mothers carrying binders of evidence or villagers taking turns to visit Beijing with hope worn thin, are not merely seeking verdicts. They are resisting erasure, and in doing so they crack the polished veneer of the regime's lies. Every story they carry, every document they present, every night spent outside a government office. These are not just cries for help, they are acts of memory, of civil courage, and of unwelcome truth. In a regime built on lies, truth is power. The Chinese petition system, twisted and hollowed by design, reveals more than it hides, not justice but the profound absence of it. Yet in every step taken by those who refuse to surrender, every voice raised, every injustice named, there is a quiet defiance. Resilience is not just endurance, it is choosing to see clearly and still not give in. Awareness is not despair, it is the beginning of change. And truth, even when silenced, has a way of spreading. The system may try to wear people down, but the cracks are growing. What they fear most is not protests or slogans, it's the moment people stop believing the lie. And that moment is coming.